Where materialism has led us is to quantum mechanics, where we don't actually understand what the fundamental nature of reality is yet. I think we might, and that's where it's headed. But the answer to the materialist question, what is matter? Is it actually at bottom? The answer could be conscious experience.
Annaka, I loved Lights On, your probing and compelling audio documentary on consciousness, your 10 chapters following your own journey on consciousness, coming up to a conclusion, not a firm conclusion, but a conclusion that consciousness may be fundamental in the universe, a very controversial idea. So what I want to do now is to ask you a series of short questions that are designed to probe your theory of consciousness, but this is not too serious. So whatever comes into your mind, there's no wrong answer here. Anything you say is fine. Okay. So I have some rapid fire questions, and let's just have some fun. So number one, very simple. What is the essence of consciousness?
Felt experience or being.
2, what is necessary for consciousness to happen?
We don't know. I don't know.
But the possibility is that what's necessary is for consciousness to be fundamental. That's a possibility, right?
Yes.
That's so yes. That if consciousness were not fundamental, then we wouldn't have consciousness because it couldn't be an emergent.
That's correct.
That would mean it's necessary. So third question is, what is sufficient for consciousness, for human consciousness? What are the things?
Should I answer this question assuming consciousness is fundamental? Because I can kind of
you answer it however you want. Sure.
Okay.
So if consciousness, let's do it your way. That's better. That's a better question. Okay. If consciousness is fundamental, what is then sufficient for human consciousness?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I would say memory. There's kind of a list of things you would need for human consciousness.
Right. What are the list of things you would need, assuming consciousness is fundamental in the universe? So we're starting with that. So what else do we need?
Well, I mean, I would say it's dependent on the structure of consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental, it has a structure. It's a mystery as to why it has a structure. But in the structure of a human being, the types of experiences, the types of conscious experiences you and I are familiar with are the types of things that arise in that place in the universe.
Okay, next. What are the simplest animals to which you would attribute consciousness?
Well, if consciousness is fundamental, there are conscious experiences arising in every life form. I don't think that they're necessarily arising the way they do for human beings. But if a worm is conscious, it would experience something very subtle like pressure or changes in temperature.
Yeah. So next question, do fish feel pain?
I don't know.
So that's a very important answer, because if consciousness is fundamental, then they have some kind of conscious experience, but because of the structure of the brain or whatever, it may not be feeling pain. We don't know.
That's right. Well, and this is actually something I spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about. If consciousness is fundamental, we have an ethical issue on our hands, which is where in the universe will we find suffering? And that will be a very important question to address.
Absolutely. And you're prescient because you anticipated my next question. So if animals are conscious, much as we are, especially higher animals, does that mean we shouldn't eat them?
Yes. I mean, I think a lot about suffering and the capacity for suffering. And I think, we should decrease the amount of suffering to the whatever degree we can. And so it's a complex topic, but I think causing animals to suffer is not something we should be doing if we can avoid it. Yeah.
Sure, and I would have thought that as we think about this, there's arguments for being a vegetarian and not
Sure.
eating animals.
Sure.
Uh,
Although consciousness doesn't need to be fundamental for us to make that argument. I
right,
think we
sure,
know
sure,
enough about the brain to assume that
sure.
animals feel
Yeah.
pain.
The one argument that I heard, which I was very surprised, I may have
Mm,
been someone in the meat industry putting this, or
mm.
somebody funded by the meat industry, but nonetheless, it took me aback. And it said this: it said, if we didn't eat animals, we wouldn't breed animals, and we wouldn't breed animals, there'd be a huge number less of animals, cows, let's say cows, that would not have had conscious experiences.
Yeah.
So if we didn't eat animals, we should treat them well, and then, through their life, and kill them, slaughter them
Yeah.
well. But if we didn't do that, there'd be dozens of millions of animals that would not have had a conscious
And
experience
had all the good
and
experiences
had
that
all the good experience.
I
And
know they're very complex,
that took me aback.
philosophical arguments that happen. Yeah, I've heard lots of versions of this philosophical debate. Um,
All right. Well, we're not going to solve it, but it's interesting to explore.
I tend to believe that the suffering is carries a greater weight than the happy or more positive experiences, and so I find it very difficult to justify any amount of happy experiences with some level of suffering on the other end, or some cost of suffering.
Next question: can AI ever be conscious as we are conscious?
That's a great question, and something I think about a lot. If consciousness is fundamental, there are conscious experiences arising every place we see matter. So in artificial intelligence as well. If consciousness is fundamental, I believe that the matter that each system is made of is actually much more relevant in terms of the conscious experiences that arise
Mm-hmm.
than the behavior of that system. So, I mean, this is a very interesting question, and we may be faced with this very bizarre situation in the near future. If there is artificial intelligence that mimics the behavior of human beings, so externally they're acting in the ways that human beings act, but they're actually made of something. Their systems are actually so different
All right.
that the experiences arising are nothing like a human being. We'll be in this very bizarre situation where we have intuitions for responding to behavior, because in our circumstance that maps on to the internal experiences. That our intuitions just won't be relevant. So, I mean, that's kind of, I'm answering a slightly different
No,
question,
that's a
but
very profound question, and I agree with you. I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Next, is virtual immortality possible? Now, this is where our
Mm,
person consciousness is uploaded to another medium. It can be silicon, it can be some other biological medium for that matter. To where by a full knowledge of every part of our brain, it's not possible in current technology, but given not 50 or 100 years, but 50,000 or 100,000 years,
yeah,
technology would enable you to know every physical state. So if you had that
yeah.
and you
Mm,
uploaded it, would
mm,
it be you,
mm.
or would it be just a clone, like a super twin?
Yeah, I mean, these questions can be asked even without future technology. And so, yeah, the question is whether a clone is having the same experiences. Whether you could have a clone that's not conscious. I tend to think that that's not the case. I think it's possible that we will reach a future where our conscious experience can be uploaded in that way. I don't necessarily think our conscious experiences are dependent on a brain being a brain. I see it as a very what's the word? I see this kind of as a nightmarish scenario. I know that most people think about this because they think it's what they want,
Yeah, right. I
kind of
agree.
living forever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I hope that that doesn't happen because I think if consciousness is fundamental, there are much more interesting things happening in the universe than being a human being. And so keeping a human being stuck in that form for all eternity does not seem
Oh,
ideal to me.
very, very, very
But
profound.
I think it's possible. Yeah.
Very, very profound. Okay, next. If consciousness is fundamental, our assumption, does it affect whether we have uh, free will in the sense of libertarian
Mm,
free will, not the illusion of
mm,
free will,
mm,
not a compatibilist with determinism free will, but a true libertarian free
mm.
will? Does it change
I don't
our
yeah.
explanation, or doesn't affect it at all?
I don't actually think it does affect it.
Okay.
I talk about free will in my work because I think the part of it that I consider to be an illusion is a further argument for consciousness not being what we think it is, which is arising out of complex processing. So I use the argument to go in that direction. But I think no, if consciousness is fundamental, it doesn't really. It's the universe is still structured the way the universe is
So in
structured,
a
and
sense, you're using free will, much as you use in your audio documentary, which is terrific. The
yes,
self,
of self.
the
Yes.
self, and free will are similar in terms of giving us a new intuition about what consciousness is. And
That's
so,
right, and I actually see the self and free will as part of the same
yeah.
thing. I see free will, what I'm calling the illusion of free will, um, part of the larger illusion of self.
Good. Next question. Would you ascribe any truth to ESP, extrasensory perception, and parapsychology?
Mm,
Because consciousness as fundamental, which is an
mm,
assumption you're making, might
mm,
allow certain events to occur in
mm.
reality that would not be permitted in a strictly materialism point of view because they violate the laws of physics.
Yeah, so, actually, my view, if consciousness is fundamental, is still falls into the materialist category. I think the materials are simply the way we perceive other conscious experiences arising in the universe, so it doesn't change the physics of things. I think, I'm open-minded about I'm pretty skeptical, but I'm open-minded about certain, experiences that, would fall into this category, of, psychic or something else. But I think, most of the reported cases of these I see as not legitimate cases.
Sure.
If there are legitimate cases and ones that, have caused me to become interested, I've always felt that there is some explanation for it, and there's some physicalist explanation for it. We just don't yet understand the universe well enough to explain how these things happen, how one person might be able to know what another person is thinking. I think if consciousness is fundamental, that does give us a broader range of ways to describe those types of things because it's the experiences that are fundamental. And especially if time and space are not what we think they are and are not part of the fundamental story, there's some sense in which conscious experiences could overlap in time and space. And I
Sure.
don't
No,
claim
that's
to
very
really
significant.
understand what I'm
No, I
saying,
mean,
but
it's a very
yeah,
profound point. If consciousness is fundamental, but space and time are not fundamental, that would seem to give theoretical underpinnings to claims of psi, ESP, parapsychology. Look, it doesn't. I'd
yeah,
say 99.99% of
yeah,
the reported cases are, illusion, delusion, fraud,
sure.
false
Yes,
expectations, scientific bias, a million different things. But all
yes,
you need is one
yes,
that violate, at least as we know, the laws of physics. So
yes.
consciousness being fundamental and space and time not being fundamental, if that's the assumption, that, as you said, very nicely gives us more tools in our toolkit to deal with anomalous experiences.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I would still consider it to be a physicalist explanation, though.
yeah,
It's
yeah, and
just
you use and you're, Galen Strawson famously says that
yeah.
panpsychism is the real materialism, and
Yes,
everybody else
I
is
agree
has
with
a
that,
false
yeah.
materialism.
Right.
And that's fine. But
Yeah. The hard problem of matter, not the hard problem of consciousness.
so, but
Yeah.
materialism, as it's classically used as physicalism, is that the laws of physics, as we understand it,
Yes.
are not violable, and consciousness is not part of that. So, I mean, it's how we're using the term, and
Yes.
absolutely free to redefine materialism, and I like that, but it really focuses
Yeah.
on what we're talking about.
Although I'll just say one more thing, which is I don't think I'm redefining materialism, because where materialism has led us is to quantum mechanics, where we don't actually understand what the fundamental nature of reality is yet. I think we might, and that's where it's headed. But the answer to the materialist question, what what is matter? Is it actually at bottom? The answer could be conscious experience. That could be what it is all describing. That all of the not that the mathematics and physics and all of our theories are wrong, but that what they are describing at bottom is conscious experiences arising in the universe.
Next question, a big one for us personally. What about life after death?
Hmm.
Do theories of consciousness affect life after death? And in specific, if consciousness is fundamental,
Hmm.
does that give any additional hope that our first person experience can survive bodily and brain dissolution?
Ah. I mean, I don't think I'll give the answer that many people hope for. But if consciousness is fundamental, the universe is nothing but conscious experiences arising. That's all it is. The shape that the conscious experience I'm having right now in this human form, um, I don't think it makes sense to think that that would continue. I think there's a clear relationship between the conscious experiences that arise in the universe and the form that they exist in, and so the form changes and the conscious experiences change. But I think there's something at least interesting, and maybe spiritual for some people, that conscious experience itself never goes away. It is always here. It's what the universe is. But the forms it takes, I think, are ever changing.
So, would it be possible, if consciousness is fundamental, that the experiences that we have in our life, which obviously now are encoded in neuronal chemicals and circuitry in our brain, is it
Yeah.
possible that that could be, shall we say, imprinted on
Mm.
some consciousness that would have survival capabilities, assuming consciousness is fundamental and therefore unceasing?
Um, yeah, the short answer is I think something like that is possible. I think
All
it's
right, that's good enough for me.
unlikely. Um,
Good enough for me, just possible.
okay.
That's fine. Okay, last question.
I know what I was gonna say. I had one other thought there,
Okay,
which is
sure.
that if consciousness is fundamental and time is not fundamental, there's some sense in which every conscious experience that ever arises in the universe is
Oh,
kind of eternally existing.
that's an interesting, and in a sense, it in a weird sense, it's eternally existing, and it also eternally existed in the past as well as in the future. I mean, you could
Right. Well, there's no
make
real
that.
past and future, yeah, without
Yeah,
time.
make
Yeah.
that argument, and then you get completely bonkers when you think
Yes.
about that.
Yeah. And disturbed as I do about the idea that suffering, one thing that's wonderful about time is that any suffering you
Yes,
worry about comes to an end, and it's not nice to think about
if it
every
doesn't,
conscious experience existing forever. So I'm
right?
trying to find a way around that
Okay, good.
in my view of a universe in which consciousness is
And
fundamental.
every piece of bad art would last forever, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so last question. A bottom line on a scale of 1 to 100, your intuition of whether
Mm,
consciousness indeed is irreducible and fundamental. So
mm,
1 meaning, absolutely not, it's all
mhm.
emergent, and 100, I'm 100% sure. So on this scale, where is Annaka Harris?
67.
Wow, 2/3. Okay. Okay, I think I may be in your range. I'd have to
Yeah?
think about it. I don't ask myself those questions, but I think
Yeah.
I think we'd be, pretty much in
Yeah.
line. So,
And
this has been
I started the documentary at about 50-50, so I've
interesting.
gone
And you
every few
started
points.
your first book, the main book, Conscious. Where were you then? 10?
Mm. I worked on that book really for about 20 years, so it's hard to say where the start
Ah,
of that book
uh,
was. Um, but, the beginning of my journey was I was at 1.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just believed it was an emergent property, in brains and central nervous systems, and didn't really consider any other option is where I began, so
Yeah. Okay. Great. So
I'm
67.
67
We'll
points
do
since
that.
then. Yeah.
We'll every few years we'll get together again and track you and see if you go higher or lower. And I'll
Okay.
do the same for myself.
Okay,
So
that's
we'll
great, I
see
love
how
that.
we pass each other or move together. So once again, Annaka, it's been terrific. Lights On is an amazing contribution
Thank
to the
you.
way we think about consciousness and its importance in our lives and in the universe. So I recommend it to everyone. As I said, it's a unique. There are many books on consciousness, but this is a unique presentation.
Thank
So
you.
many thanks everyone for watching. You can continue by watching Closer to Truth videos. We have 1,500 on consciousness, 100 TV episodes exploring all aspects of it on the Closer to Truth website and YouTube channel. We deal with all facets of consciousness, how the brain works, the nature of personal identity, do we have free will, and then all the theories, panpsychism, dualism, idealism. We deal with parapsychology, life after death, cosmic consciousness, all the questions we're doing here, but we try to infuse it all with critical thinking. We appreciate everyone's support for Closer to Truth. Please tell your friends, like our videos, donate as you can. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and comment below. You can support Closer to Truth by subscribing. Closer to Truth is now accepting your tax-exempt donations. Please come to closertotruth.com/donate. Thank you very much for supporting us, and thanks for watching.